The Indiana Fighting Hoosiers, Don Fisher on the call, after they eviscerate the Oregon Ducks in the national semifinal. And yes, indeed, on this Monday, I am about to say what all of you have been knowing would take place forever. I'm about to say what all of you have been anticipating for the totality of your life. I'm about to say the fait accompli that everybody always assumed about the Indiana University football Hoosiers. Indiana is one win away. Indiana is 4 quarters on the doorstep of being the national champions in college football and being unblemished with a 16-0 mark, the first time that anyone in the history of Division I college football will go 16-0 in a season. But they have a monumental task to accomplish that feat in taking on the Miami Hurricanes. And yes, I know you can look at it and say, out of the ACC, roll the eye. I know you can look at it and say, 10th seeded, roll the eye. I know you can look at it and say, quarterback at $7 million a year that's in his 6th year of college football. I get all of it. But Miami's stout. They got a great defense. They have an experienced quarterback, and it's going to be a big assignment for Indiana. But are we not at the point now where you would be a fool? You would be an absolute fool at this point if you were to doubt Curt Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers. A remarkable story. One that is arguably, certainly one of, if not the most unlikely of tales in the history of college football. And we will talk plenty about it over the course of the week of what Indiana has accomplished after their annihilation of Oregon on Friday evening. Good afternoon to you. My name is Jake Query. Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch, is the other voice you'll hear on this program. Eddie Garrison, and this is exciting, actually. Eddie Garrison, true story. If you recall, gosh, it was back when Oregon was first announced as a Big Ten school member. And this is a true story. The Oregon Duck, does anybody else recall? I love the Oregon Duck. And a matter of fact, I'm extremely envious of Eddie today. But the Oregon Duck did a tour where it went through and did different fun photographs around the Big Ten when, as part of its introduction to the Big Ten Conference, that one of them, the Duck was laying on top of Heps Rock down at Memorial Stadium. A lot of people took offense to that. I don't know that the Oregon mascot truly knew the symbolism of the rock itself, but nonetheless, and Oregon, I will give them credit. The University of Oregon, good sports. If you did not see it after the game, D'Angelo Pons on the field, an Oregon staffer, I would assume an equipment manager, maybe it was an assistant coach, but somebody who had the football itself went and presented it to D'Angelo Pons on the field, as if to say, like, hey, we managed to, here is the ball that you had a pick six for, whatever, which was a classy move. I think Oregon, all told, even though it was obviously the opponent in that game, for the most part, we would say Oregon, good opponent, classy organization. And that goes along with this and why Eddie's not here today. I talked to Eddie yesterday. He was elated about this possibility as a make good on the fact that Oregon had that mascot kind of making fun of things. They've got now the mascots, I guess, is like some sort of a bet or whatever. The mascot is going to be doing a new set of photos around Bloomington, but this time showing to be subservient to kind of the Indiana culture. But the student that, and if kids are listening, my apologies, the student that is typically the mascot had to get back to Oregon because they're getting ready for enrollment for the new semester. So they sent a bulletin out. Eddie, of course, a member of the Big Head Federation. That duck head is rather big, and so there's only a certain group of people that can fit in the duck head. So Eddie is filling in today, wearing the uniform to take the different photos for Oregon on the Bloomington campus today, which is very exciting. That's why Eddie's not here. But Nathaniel is here and capably filling in. Nathaniel, who put together the highlight package you just heard of Indiana on their way now to take on Miami for the national championship.
So, Eddie was in Atlanta over the weekend, right? So I filled in for him on Saturday
That's where he met the Oregon folks that asked him to fill in, right?
That's
Or was
right.
it the
And then
I
Pat
thought it was the
Boylan
Big
on the
Head
Pacers.
Federation.
Pat Boylan talks to me and says, when he calls you, don't call me Atticus Finch. Is that an insult? And here was Pat's reasoning. Atticus Finch is the big moral character in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Correct.
It would maybe be a compliment to be called that. You say, do not call me moral. That's what Pat says.
Yeah, I can appreciate Pat's deep decipher there. I think it's rather this. When I say your nickname, let me ask you this. How do you see it, Nathaniel?
I enjoy it. Yeah, it's
Okay.
cool.
I see it as, Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch, simply because when you say your last name to people, what's the first name other than within your family that people think of?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just simply the point of, I realize, Finch, you normally think of Atticus. That's not my name. My name is Nathaniel. That's all it is. Atticus Finch, very cool, though. Gregory Peck, great actor. NFL playoffs, and I'm going to get into Indiana in a second, but the playoffs yesterday or over the weekend in the NFL have been sensational. Kind of a dud game to end it, but has there ever been an exciting, great game with New England? Every single Patriots game in the playoffs since the beginning of time, every single one of them, 42 and drizzly, like foggy, gross weather, late game, dark, dreary, drab, end of the weekend. And unless you're a Patriots fan, they all suck, every one of them, because the Patriots always end up winning at home. And you're like, okay. And listen, this particular team for New England is actually likable. For Vrabel to be jettisoned out of Tennessee, and he ends up there, and he's brought a great culture to New England. And Drake May is a very good quarterback. And there are a lot of things about the Patriots you have to admire. And I thought about this over the course of the weekend, and I don't mean to pile on. I don't mean to beat a dead horse. But I thought it was a bad weekend for Chris Ballard. Thought it was a bad weekend for Chris Ballard because all of the explanations, all of the justifications for the mediocrity that the Colts continue to find themselves in continue to be dismissed by other teams in the playoffs. New England had a legendary quarterback in Tom Brady, who, by the way, is really good in the booth now. I didn't think I'd say that, but he is very good. But they went out, they got themselves a young franchise quarterback. They didn't sit there and dilly-dally around forever about it. They got a quarterback, they went and got a coach, they put them together, and they're like, let's go. Young quarterback, big arm. It's the way to do it. You don't see, New England isn't sitting around festering over the fact that, they've been kicking the can at the quarterback position, et cetera, for years. They just went about it and got back into the I mean, it's been a while, I realize, but you get what I'm saying. I thought the Rams game, credit to Carolina. I thought Carolina, was plucky, hanging around. But the Rams won that game largely because, and was there any question in your mind they were going to pull that game out? There probably was not. And the reason being is Matt Stafford, who just has a composure about him, a big arm. I know he got banged up at the end of that game, but you knew, and he has very good weapons to throw to, clearly. But you felt like if he was going to get the football at the end of that game, or that it somehow, shape, or form, each time you looked over, you're like, you know what? The Rams are going to be in position here because of Matt Stafford. And while I don't know this lock, stock, and barrel as a fact, I think it's very plausible and has been reported numerous times that when Matt Stafford was in Detroit and the Colts were a possibility, it was Chris Ballard that said, no. I think that the quarterback position, I don't think he's the kind of guy that puts you over the top. He lost a lot of games in Detroit, et cetera. I don't know for certain that that's the case, but people very reputable have always said that was his sentiment, Chris Ballard's. If that's the case again, and unfortunately, you would lean towards he loses benefit of the doubt on that story if you were to say, well, that's not true. Okay, except for that he's kicked that can so many times, you would think there could be some legitimacy to that. But it's the other team from within that that division that I think also really kind of indicts the Colts. and that's the San Francisco 49ers. Because if you look at the 49ers, there is no team in the NFL, no team, that has been more injury prone in the last year than the 49ers. Now, I did see some. Do we happen to have the tinfoil hat conspiracy theory music by chance, which we can get into hot and heavy with Indiana football? But have you seen this, Nathaniel, this claim about the Niners stadium?
I swear by it. Let me tell you. I saw this a couple weeks ago and showed all my friends and said, you'll never believe it. And last night proved it.
So the conspiracy theory, I mean, I shouldn't laugh. I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong in this, but the conspiracy theory I saw is that Levi Stadium, right? Isn't that the name, or whatever the stadium is now, whatever they call it, in Santa Clara was built next to some sort of like toxic waste area, and that is producing a chemical like in the environment or the water of the stadium that, or maybe near their complex, that deteriorates tendons. Is that right?
It's an electromagnetic plant. Mm-hmm. So, it's deteriorating your soft tissue and your tendons.
Yeah, so that's why all these. Now, keep in mind, the Niners are only in that stadium. I mean, I guess they play 8 games as opposed to just 1, but it's not like that's where they're going to work every day, right?
Well, it is. It's right next to their practice facility.
Okay, I was going to say, is there a facility right there? Now, are regular staffers and employees that are also there suffering this terrible fate?
Well, so it deteriorates them to the point where when you're on the football field
the
and you're putting them through
exertion
stress.
of being a football player?
Exactly.
Okay. But either way, kidding aside, the Niners have had serious injury nearly at every major position, and yet, including at the quarterback position, and yet they have the depth to overcome that. Injuries were not the reasoning nor the excuse for them if they were to fall short this year. But I just thought overall there were a lot of things that took place that we'll get into over the weekend. Chap going to join us about 1 o'clock. We'll talk to him about it. That might have just been lessons for the Colts. Whenever you're the team on the outside looking in, there's something to be learned. You're always looking to learn. And there were several examples of that for the Colts over the weekend. But let's get back to Indiana football. We will talk so much about this over the course of the upcoming week. And there are so many different ways to look at it and say it. Now, I sent this post on the X Post Twitter Saturday, or maybe it was yesterday. And it is tough to sometimes make your point on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Now, I mentioned that the bot farms jump on something and then it's off and running. So the following that I sent now has, for example, James, which is J Shepard 64, who joined Twitter 2 years ago, does not follow me. He's an independent vet. Doesn't argue with fools. They'll drag you down to the level and beat you with their experience. I'm sure this is a real living human person because I sent a post and now literally I can't go an hour without getting an alert that somebody's responded by simply saying, what is the point of this statement? It's like, so you tell me if you understand the point of this statement. I simply found this interesting. With the win next Monday night, Indiana would finish 16-0. They would only need to do so for 11 consecutive seasons and then start 6-0 in the 12th season. And they will then be 500 lifetime. And people are like, what's your point? What's your point? Why are you a hater? None of that. It is simply to illuminate for those that are unfamiliar. And by that, I mean outside of Indiana or outside of those that have followed Indiana football. The remarkable unlikelihood of this story. A program that coming into the year was nearly 190 games below 500 historically. A program that had only been to one Rose Bowl lifetime. A program that, has winless records of recency. And by recency, I mean not going back to, 1898. It is literally a program that has lost more games in Division I college football going into this year than any in the country. Northwestern has since passed them. They were kind of neck and neck there for a while. Obviously, Indiana has yet to lose this year. Northwestern has taken that claim back, but you get the point. And there are several things in play for Indiana football that have led to this point. Number one is obviously the coach in Curt Cignetti. And number two is obviously when you have a quarterback that wins the Heisman, that has more touchdown passes in the postseason than incomplete passes, that throws with an incredible accuracy, all of those things are going to weigh themselves in towards putting you in the position that you're in. But I think that's actually selling short a number of different factors in no particular order. Number one, Indiana, for as good, and listen, Elijah Surratt is unbelievable. Charlie Becker continues to emerge seemingly out of nowhere. Omar Cooper Jr. is a wonderful player. And these were not highly touted guys. Does it help to have the football exactly where it needs to be when you expect it to be there? Yes. But Elijah Surratt drops nothing. Literally everything you throw in his direction, he makes a catch. But a big part that facilitates all of that also, and it's symbiotic, is the running game. In Indiana has very, very good running backs. Very good running backs. And I don't mean even like sweeping in space, Reggie Bush type backs. I mean hard-nosed, up the middle, run, tough as heck backs. And when you have three of them, I mean, look at Oregon. If you want to know the importance and the importance of depth and preparation, in that game, Indiana and Oregon, late in the game, once the game was basically being salted away, Indiana brings in Kobe Martin, their third-string running back. Freshman, right? See, a freshman or sophomore? I think he's a freshman from Fishers. And immediately he's running hard and making plays. And yes, he has had time over the course of the year where he has had reps. But still, he is not their mainline player, right? But they have every back they go with. Hemby could lead you in rushing one game. Black could lead you in rushing one game. And then you bring in, you go down to the point where Martin gets in there, and yet he's prepared. He knows where he needs to be. He makes great runs because there's a precision there. Oregon, on the other hand, on their second or third possession, Oregon, of course, down a running back because of an injury, down a running back because of the transfer portal. So they're going with a freshman running back, and one of the key turnovers for Oregon, Dante Moore drops back, and he's going up to throw, but the back is coming up to block, and they basically collide. The pad hits the ball, loose ball, Indiana recovers it. It's a little thing. But that is the inexperience of going into your depth chart and not maintaining precision. It's not an indictment on Oregon, but it rather is an illumination on the precision of Indiana. Because Indiana, no matter how far down the depth chart they go, seemingly every player that comes in is equally as prepared as the guy that he is replacing. And in the very first play of the game, and I know there's all kinds of discussion out there. Tinfoil hat theory again, right? I mean, the twice in one show we get to play it right off the top, the tinfoil hat theory music, right? And it's out there. Indiana is winning because they are tapping into the iCloud of other teams and stealing their practice video. And in addition to that, they are tapping into the radio transmission from upstairs to down to the coaches. And Indiana knows the plays that are being called in before the ball is even snapped. And I've actually said on this radio show, you've heard me say it, Indiana looks like a team that just knows what's happening before the ball is even snapped. I think I even sent an ex-post Twitter. And surprisingly, the bot farm didn't get a hold of it and say, what is the point of this post? But I had sent a thing a couple of weeks ago that said, at some point, people are going to realize when trying trickery against Indiana that Indiana knows the play better than you do. And it is a credit to Indiana. While that is a preposterous allegation that probably has no foundation nor merit behind it, it is a credit to Indiana that Indiana's execution and precision defensively lends it to being somewhat a possible story. I mean, not possible, but I'm saying like plausible. A plausible thing. Like you see it, you go, they actually look like they know what's going on. But that comes down to this. And maybe I'll be proven wrong at some point, but that comes down, I would say, to this. And this is where Indiana football is fascinating. And this is where, when there's a 30 for 30 about what Indiana has done, or 20 years from now we look back on it, it is very possible that we're going to read and hear about this. Indiana football in 2025 is the anti-Fab Five. Now, that's nothing against the Fab Five: Ray Jackson, Jimmy King, Juwan Howard, Chris Webber, Jalen Rose. My graduating class of high school. Nothing against those guys that were revolutionary and trend-setting. They didn't win anything, but they were a fabulous group. No question about it. But that Fab Five was so socially important and so groundbreaking for college basketball, not just because of the baggy shorts and the black socks, but more so because prior to that, it was the anomaly to have a freshman starting on certainly a Final Four team, let alone 5 of them. And it was the new trend of, if you can go out and get 5 big-time Division I 5-star players and put them together, it doesn't matter if they're freshmen. If they can play, they can play. And, yeah, you had Purvis Ellison in 86. I mean, obviously, freshmen were ineligible for the better part of the 70s, until the late 70s, early 80s, whatever it was, when freshmen could play. But my point being, it still was, that was what was so groundbreaking about it. And Indiana this year may be breaking the mold again in terms of the college football side of things. Because we can talk about how it looks like they're stealing plays or they're breaking into iClouds or whatever it may be. But it probably more so is this. Curt Cignetti has made it very clear. I prefer experience and wisdom and maturity over the right out of high school 5-star guy. That's not now. What's going to be interesting is Indiana and James Madison both were never in play for those guys before. Now they are. So we'll see how that changes things. But in terms of how this roster was built, Curt Cignetti came to Indiana, brought with him players from James Madison that he knew and knew him, and then accentuated it with a mix. Yes, there are young players that were brought to Indiana, but Mendoza, for example, prime example, but other players that are transfer players that are veteran, older, mature players that have been through the pomp and circumstance of learning the game, of the big moments, of the expectation, whatever it may be. And these guys in particular, a lot of these guys have not played in those big games, but they played a ton of games, and you're just different, your mentality. You have an absorption and an understanding of when it is your last opportunity and you're 22 and 23 versus a guy that's 19 and says, I'm going to get 4 of these chances. There's an urgency and there is a focus that takes place the older that you get. Fact. In Indiana's roster, if you look at it, the number of 6-year, 5-year, 4-year players on both sides of the football, that is by design. And it is very easy to say that the explanation for Indiana looking so prepared is that they know what's coming. But in fact, I think it's probably more so just simply a maturity and a great staff that is scouting things out, coming up with a game plan, not burning out their players, and everyone's bought in. And it's an unbelievable story. Don Fisher, you heard him on the radio call, as you could almost hear towards the end with Fish, like with Elijah Surratt, of just like this really is happening, isn't it? And it is unbelievable that Don Fisher now has the chance and will call a national championship opportunity for an undefeated team in both sports that he calls for Indiana University. His thoughts on all of it and preparing for Miami. We'll discuss it with Don Fisher next. So Don Fisher was on the call, and you could hear the combination of the excitement, the drama, and at times almost the incredulous nature with each and every call of Indiana continuing to pour it on against Oregon. The Hoosiers now one win away from exactly where everybody thought they'd be at this point, the national champions of college football. But it's a big one left with Miami. Don joins us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. And Don, I'll begin with this, if you could, for those. And I didn't see much green at all inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But for those of us that were not there, can you just kind of recap, I guess, the overall energy and excitement for Indiana fans down in Atlanta?
Well, it was special. There's no question about it, Jake. Much like Pasadena, it was packed with Indiana fans, perhaps even more so than it was in Pasadena. We thought it was about an 80% Indiana crowd at Pasadena, and I think this was probably about a 90 to 95% crowd in Atlanta. It was just phenomenal. And the Hoosier Nation, there's no doubt they're on board. It is the most impactful performance of the season in the sense of what Indiana's been able to do this year, I guess, in the history of Indiana football, what they've been able to do this season. And without question, I think everybody's just as excited about what's happened in Miami coming up on Monday.
Don, I wanted to kind of tip the cap here to an area. And, listen, obviously Fernando Mendoza is tremendous. I mean, it goes without saying. We know that. And the receivers that he throws to continue to emerge and make great plays. But to me, at least on this radio program, and I'm at fault here, I don't know that I have given enough credit to Indiana's running game. And I think that taking nothing away from Mendoza, but so much of that is facilitated also that symbiotic relationship. But it doesn't matter whose number gets called. Those running backs run really, really hard. Have we overlooked is the wrong word, but have we given enough credit to the running game for Indiana?
Probably not, Jake, just because it is such an important role that they play. And the balance that Indiana showed this year, both running and passing the football, and then running the football when you need to run it. When you got to put a game away, you want to take away the clock and all those kinds of things. This running game is spectacular in that vein. And yeah, they throw a pass in there every now and then just to keep the drive going. But generally speaking, what Indiana's been doing to most teams here in the second half of ball games is just taking their will away with the fact that you can't get the ball away from them, number one. And by the time that you do get it back, the game is out of hand. And that's one of the reasons this team's really, really good at this point in the season. And the balance that they've showed this year, it's pretty amazing. If you look at the passing yards per ball game, they've had 242, about 243 yards a game. In the rushing department, they've had 218 yards a ball game. You don't get much more balance than that, Jake. So when I look at this run game, it's just as important as the passing attack.
Don, I'm going to assume here, which can be dangerous, right? But UCLA was undefeated in 1954 in college football. They shared the national championship, I believe, that year. In 1964, they were undefeated in basketball. I don't know if they had the same play-by-play voice for both sports over those 10 years. But either way, it would put you in a company of two, but I believe company of one, of play-by-play broadcast voices that have been part of the chance to win a national championship unblemished in both football and basketball. Have you had a chance to really absorb just the overall accomplishment and anomaly of that within the athletic department?
I have. I've not looked at it that closely. I've heard a couple of people talk about it here recently, but I haven't looked it up myself. I don't know what the stats are on that. I don't know who. Was UCLA unbeaten that year in football?
Yeah, UCLA was 9-0 in 54. I think they had a tie, but they were 9-0-1 in 54, and they were, back then you just had the two polls, right? And they were one of the two polls national champions. Yes.
And so they won the national championship in a poll.
Correct. That is correct. Yes. That's the only school that's done it in both sports.
Yeah, and Indiana, of course, has had the last undefeated national champion in basketball since 1976. So, and this is the 50th anniversary of that. So, for this to happen, if Indiana wins the national championship, they do it 50 years after the basketball team did it, which is kind of phenomenal or ironic, I guess I should say, in itself.
It's the team in basketball that did it, Don, a little bit apples and oranges because they had obviously been undefeated in 75 in the regular season. They lost to Kentucky in the regional finals. So there was a lot of hope and hype and expectation, I would assume, in 76. But for you to witness, I guess, kind of both. I know you were new to the Indiana scene at that time. So, too, was Bob Knight, though. And now what Curt Cignetti has done with the football program. Are there any parallels at all between the two, or is it simply the anomaly of the statistics of it that link it?
Well, without question, if both end up unbeaten, that will link them forever. There's no question about that. But it's hard for me to answer that. To be quite honest about it, I mean, from a basketball, they're two different sports. Number one, they're team sports, which is key, and that's always a big thing. But from my standpoint, I try not to gauge it in that way, I guess is the way to say it. I just look at it as this being the biggest anomaly about this right now is the incredible turnaround, and I hate that word because it just doesn't do justice, but the incredible turnaround of this football program in 2 seasons under a coach who I don't think there's any question is the best in the country. And I think he's going to end up winning every single Coach of the Year award that's out there, and I think there are 8 of those. And I think the last one takes place after the championship game.
He absolutely is the coach of the century at this point, right? I mean, in terms of Coach of the Year. But, Don, one of the things about this Indiana team, and we've talked a lot about this, just their overall, the preparation and the precision. And a guy that you had mentioned in the broadcast, I heard you mention, just what an impressive performance he had. But considering that he was out and now is back and was a guy that came in with no stars and out of high school and everything else, can you kind of touch on for our listeners the timing that has taken place and the relationship on the field between Mendoza and Elijah Surratt? Because seemingly you put the ball in the area of Elijah Surratt and he is going to make the play. The guy's been phenomenal, but there also just seems to be this almost telekinetic relationship between he and the quarterback itself. How much time away from the games itself has gone into that precision between those two?
Well, I know this. When Fernando came on campus in the spring, and I got to see him practice in spring and those kinds of things, I knew that he was a hard worker. That was, without question, something that Kurt Cignetti values. But on top of that, he had the skill set, the talent level to be a tremendous quarterback. He was struggling a little bit at that time because of what he had to suffer at California from a pressure standpoint from other teams because their offensive line was apparently not good at all. And I don't want to say terrible because I don't know that, but it couldn't have been very good. He got pressured, or at least he got sacked 40-plus times during that season. So you knew that he was going to have a little bit of happy feet, and he did early on. But he worked through that through the fall, or through the spring, I should say, was much, much better as the spring ended. And then I know from the passing standpoint, the 7-on-7 drills, all those kinds of things that took place during the summer, these guys worked their tails off. And Elijah Surratt's one of those guys. He's a gym rat anyway, is the only way to term it, to make people understand how much time he spends on his craft. And Elijah Surratt has been an All-American every place he's been, not just here at Indiana. He was an All-American at James Madison. And I think before that, I think he played I can't remember exactly where he played, but he was an All-American at that level. So this is a guy who works constantly, and Mendoza did exactly the same thing. That's where that timing and that kind of precision comes from, is the hard work those guys put in the offseason.
Don, I thought Oregon did a nice job of responding after the pick six that started the game. I listen, I'm not going to lie to you, Don, and I know you hate my predictions, but when D'Angelo Pons had that pick six, I turned around to Shannon right then. I said, this game's over. It's over. I mean, it just felt that it was like, here we go. But I thought Oregon responded very nicely in that next drive, and they, Dante Moore took them down the field. Indiana's ability to kind of regroup from that once Oregon was able to go down the field and then really cement themselves and take control of that game from there forward, I thought was impressive. But was there any point this season that you can look back on and say that game or that moment or that test paid off for Indiana in that response against Oregon? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Well, basically, does this team respond? Do they respond to for the negative, from the negatives? You know what I mean? Is that what
Right.
you're saying?
Yeah, and was there one game that you can look back on and say it paid dividend? Whether maybe it was Iowa, but one of them where you can say that's where they were truly tested, and that paid off for them with their response against Oregon.
Yeah, I think you could say that about the Iowa game, but I think you could say it about the Oregon game, since those two games were back-to-back with the 1 week in between. But both of those games, Indiana had to respond, whether it was on the defensive side or the offensive side. They had to respond and be able to fight through the adversity and the negativity of that situation. Both of those ball games, in my mind, were the critical games that they played this season and proved to themselves that this team was special. And they've played like they are special ever since those 2 ball games.
Don Fisher will be on the call Monday night, just as he has always known would be the case in a college football national championship for the Indiana Fighting Hoosiers on the football side of things. It's been an unbelievable run, Don, and one of the, and I mean this, there was a lady yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, Don, in Jacksonville. There was a reporter that got into the press conference, or not got into, she was a credentialed media member that after the game was talking to the coach for Jacksonville in the press conference and saying how proud she was of him and, keep your head up and that kind of thing. And people questioned whether or not that was the appropriate place to say it. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead. I think this is the appropriate time to say it, and that is that in listening to the pitch of the moment, the excitement of the moment for Indiana fans, Don, your voice that has been so iconic and such a part of Indiana athletics for so long is so perfect for the energy level, the excitement, and just the payoff of all of the years of Indiana football for this moment. And as great as it is to watch the game and as great as it is to see the excitement and to see the fans and to see the posts, hearing your voice describe the action and the energy in it is literally like chicken noodle soup for the soul for Indiana fans. So we look forward to one more for this particular season. Hopefully it's going to be a win. But thank you, as always, for not only your time, but also for the energy of those calls.
Well, I can tell you this, Jake. The energy of my calls comes from that football team right now. And it did the same when I was able to do basketball games for IU back in the day when Bob Knight was the coach and they won 3 national titles. That's the blessing of my kind of job, is to be able to be a part of something like that. And I will always be eternally grateful to the good Lord for that opportunity.
Don, we appreciate it. We'll be listening Monday night from Miami between the Hurricanes and Indiana for all the marbles. Always a pleasure, Don, and certainly look forward to listening on Monday.
Appreciate it, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Don Fisher, the voice of the Hoosiers, joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. It is remarkable. There's no question about that. Mike Chappell going to join us coming up at 1 o'clock. Did you say Sean McDonough's going to join us on the program?
Yeah, that's right, 1:30.
He was on the call from the television side of things. He will join us at 1:30 today. And then Bill Benner I want to talk to, because not only does Bill Benner deserve some flowers as well, because he is a guy that has been sitting out in freezing rain watching Lorenzo White and Blake was it Blake Ezor for Michigan State run all over Indiana. I mean, years and years and years and years of misery essentially watching Indiana football. But I wanted to talk to Bill Benner, not just to, allow him to kind of celebrate this run, but also to continue to give perspective as to what it means. Because I do think there's an interesting dichotomy taking place with Indiana football. And it's aside from that of the discussion of the team itself. And I think Bill Benner represents it. I'll explain what I'm talking about on the other side. Chap coming up just about 15 minutes from now.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
John almost took that tease, as we call it in the business, all the way to 3 o'clock. That's cool. He's got a loaded show coming up 3 o'clock. A lot to talk about. Pacers in action tonight, taking on the Celtics at the Field House. Pacers have won 2 in a row. Don't look now. Don't look now. But they need to get one of those top 3 picks, by the way, for what that's worth. Good afternoon to you, Jake Query, along with Nathaniel. Don't call me Atticus Finch. I was talking about Indiana and one of the kind of a dichotomy here. And I wish I wasn't this way. I wish I wasn't the way of being cynical. Easiest way to say it. I wish I wasn't naturally cynical. And that's not to say that I'm cynical in the form of everything's a joke to me. I just, for whatever reason, and believe you me, if you folks listening right now think that's difficult at times to listen to, trust me, it's equally difficult sometimes to process. And by that I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm really not, I promise you. But I'm always kind of looking around the corner at like the other side of something or the other vantage point of something or what it would look like from the other side of the lens. And this particular improbable run of Indiana, and I don't think that for Indiana it's an improbable run per se right now. In other words, Indiana winning here these 2 games in the college football playoff, that shouldn't surprise you. If you're surprised by that at this point, I don't know where you've been. They won at Oregon. They beat Ohio State. They won when their back was against the wall against Penn State. Even for that matter, against Iowa. I mean, that game against Iowa, they were all but done. And they managed to win. Okay? So all of those things, right now, you shouldn't be surprised. But in terms of if you go back 2 years ago to the time that Curt Cignetti was brought in, or even for that matter when they were going into Columbus a year ago, and I think they were 8-0 at that point, and it still was incredulous that they were in that position. Historically speaking, as I mentioned earlier, to give you perspective on how far Indiana has had to come. And yeah, the past is irrelevant. But if you want to know why it is that people are so in, like, coming out of the woodwork for this, number one, it's because Indiana football has just never long-term given anybody anything to latch onto. They've had flashes for sure. Bill Mallory was a phenomenal football coach and a great ambassador and representative of the university. And Lee Corso was an energetic, upbeat guy. Cam Cameron was an offensive visionary that everybody thought it would work out, and he was one of their own. And Bill Lynch is an Indiana football guy through and through, so too is Tom Allen. But it doesn't mean, under any stretch of the imagination, that it would be expected that it would ever come to this with Curt Cignetti. And the cynic in me looks at this fanfare, and I'm sure Purdue fans have to feel this way. You see this fanfare and this overpour of support of literally Atlanta was Bloomington South. It was unbelievable. I wasn't there, but I'm literally the only of my group of friends from high school and college that wasn't there. And the same will be true in Miami, even though obviously you're going to have, the tickets are far more expensive, but I know a lot of people that got their Alumni Association email and they were able to get tickets. There's going to be a huge throng of Indiana fans again. But the cynic in me also looks at it and says, were these people Indiana football fans that just didn't express it because there was no reason to express it prior? Or are they Indiana football fans that literally finally put their Notre Dame gear back up in the attic for good 2 years ago? I don't think it matters either way. That's the natural cynic in me, though, to point that out. It doesn't matter either way. If you went to Indiana, you're a fan of Indiana, you're an IU fan, whatever it might be, Indiana fans are starting to figure out now that having a great football team is really fun. It is. Tailgating for a football game, no matter where it is. Tailgating for football when the sun is crisp and it's a beautiful day and the sky is blue, that is more fun than driving down the old 37 or State Road 69 in 9-degree weather with spitting ice to go watch Indiana, Minnesota on a Tuesday night in basketball. It just is. And the basketball programs, I mean, I love I grew up the year that my dad won season tickets for IU in 89 was one of the best years of my life. We went to every single game, loved everything about it. And there was something about Chuck Crabb saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, the state police remind us that snow has fallen over the course of the basketball game. Please use caution in leaving the assembly hall." That was a rite of passage. But standing out in front of the stadium, having a couple of surf sides, hanging out before the game, people are figuring out at Indiana, it's pretty fun. You know what's even more fun? Actually going in the game and watching our team win. The challenge then is for people to look at it and question the authenticity of the fan base, but I look at it and say, who cares? But I asked over the course of the weekend, who was your favorite Indiana football player pre-Signetti? And it was a great thing to ask because until the bot farm got a hold of it, there were great, and I was pleasantly surprised by the number of people that had responses that showed that they have been fans beyond just 2 weeks ago or 2 years ago or 2 months ago. Kellen Lewis got a ton of votes. And I did say, outside of Antoine Randall and Anthony Thompson, because those are givens. There were 551 replies. 551 people replied. Tevin Coleman got a ton of votes. Trent Green, who, if he wasn't on this morning, is going to be on this week on the Fan Morning Show. I'm not sure if that was this morning or coming up this week. Ernie Jones and Dave Schnell, great ones. My buddy Scott McConnell pointed those out. And they were great players in 87. The Eisenbergers, goes without saying. Levron Williams. Trendon Doss was a great player who I'd forgotten about. And like I said, a lot of people said Kellen Lewis. That was a really good one. A really good one. Several people said Chris Ditto. Friend of the show. Jordan Howard, really good one. He was a very good player. Van Waiters, who I liked a lot, great player. Nobody has said Mike Dumas, which surprises me. But a guy that got a ton of votes, and finally I said, you know what, let's get him on the show because he may have been, let me see, Thomas Lewis might have been Indiana's last first-round pick. That will change this year. Prior to that, there are first-round picks. They had a couple of, linemen that have gone in the first round. But Vaughn Dunbar, Fort Wayne Snyder, drafted into the NFL, New Orleans and Jacksonville. I think he tore his knee. Now living in the Atlanta area. And I think he's going to join the show this week. But I was sitting here thinking that Indiana football fans were all just Notre Dame fans in disguise. It's like Scooby-Doo. You tear the mask off and you're like, look, you could have gotten away with still pulling for Notre Dame if it wasn't for these meddling kids. But when I asked that question and I saw the number of responses and I saw the names within, that's what told me, you know what? There are people that have been waiting and enjoying this for a long time. And the cynic in me needs to go away. NFL playoffs, what's it tell us in terms of the Colts? Chap will help break it down next.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
NFL playoffs are in full swing now. I will allow Nathaniel to be judge and jury on this. I was very interested to see with Jacksonville what was going to take place because, Trevor Lawrence in the last, 6 to 8 weeks, finally kind of stepped into becoming the player that it was anticipated he would be when he was made the number 1 overall selection in the NFL draft coming out of Clemson. And he has had turnover issues over the course of his career. I will begin, Nathaniel, by asking you, did you watch the end of the Jacksonville-Buffalo game by chance, Nathaniel?
I did, yeah. I watched the whole thing.
Okay. So Jacksonville gets the ball. They got to go down the field. Here comes Trevor Lawrence, who's been sensational down the stretch of the season, but in the early and majority of his career has been inconsistent. And he throws the pick, I think on the first play, that ends the season for Jacksonville. Was that pick on Lawrence or the receiver?
Lawrence should not have thrown the ball because it was well covered, but I wouldn't say the interception itself you could put all on his shoulders. I mean, it's a tip ball.
Okay. Fair
But
enough.
he shouldn't have thrown it, for sure.
Should have held back, right? Joining us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, Mike Chappell of CBS 4 and WXIN Fox 59, who is the dean of covering sports for the Colts. Chap, I will begin with this, and we got a bunch to cover here. The Lawrence play, though, that's on Lawrence or on the receiver? Mike Chappell sees it how?
Well, it was tipped, wasn't it?
Yes.
Well, then I have a hard time putting it on the quarterback if it's tipped.
It was tipped by the defender, though, wasn't it, Nathaniel? Defender 1
Yeah.
tipped it, defender
Yeah.
2 picked it.
Oh, I don't remember it as tight as you do. I do have to say, all through that game, I was waiting for there to be a Jaguars moment. Because, and that's unfair to the Jaguars. Other they had a fabulous season, but I don't trust him. I didn't trust Lawrence. He probably deserved better fate than that.
Okay, Chap, before we get into the NFL, I wanted to give you the opportunity to, for those that are going to be listening at 2 o'clock when I have on Bill Benner, to set the stage. I know there are a lot of people that probably would say, well, Bill Benner was a writer. He was a columnist for the Star for years. I obviously know of his brother David that was with the Pacers. People know of Bill. And they may say, well, why is Query having on the guy that's a retired writer to talk about IU football? But it goes beyond that because I don't know of any fan of any team that probably has shown more loyalty and more devotion to a program than Bill Benner has for Indiana football. You know him as well as anybody. You've been around him. You worked with him. Is that a fair statement?
I'm sure there are other IU fans who've lived and mostly died with the football program. But what I thought with Bill, and I'm sure someone can point out columns to the contrary, I thought when he covered IU, he was fair and not necessarily, it certainly wasn't on the bandwagon. And I know he and Bob Knight, when we're talking programs in basketball, they had their differences. But Bill's been there, and it's funny. There were times in the past, the last, 10, 15 years, and what always bugged me about IU is they'd play their butts off against Ohio State and get beat close, or Michigan get beat close. Then they play some rum-dum and get run out of the building.
Right.
And one time I put, well, there you go, there's IU again. And Bill would send me a text like, hey, lay off. So he was protective. But that's fine. But yeah, I know that those, I had no idea they were. It's the biggest alumni group in the country. I had no idea. And they've been losingest program ever. I mean, does that tell you what they've been through? So I tell you, I know it's a big bandwagon, but the people at the front should be Bill and people, Kaylin Jackson. I mean, she went to IU, but people who have been there and endured So many bad moments. Good for them. I hope Bill. I know Bill's been to these last couple of games. I'm sure he's going to be going to Miami. He ought to call up Reggie and see if Reggie's got some room at the house. But I just think it's outstanding. I hope they finish it, and it'll be a story for the ages without question.
You think they will? You think they'll finish it?
Yeah, there's something going on there. Now Miami's defense is really a pass rush is the real deal. But there, and this boy, after I said all that, what this reminds me of, from Colts' perspective, is that year where they blew the doors off of, who was it, Kansas City and Denver. Peyton had like 10 touchdowns and no interceptions the first 2 games. And then they went to New England and got stuffed. That's not going to happen. So I hope they finish. I think Mendoza's on some kind of a special run, and they've got players. Their running game is good. It's not good. It's very good. They got receivers. And I got to say, I didn't see this defense in the first half of the season. I'm seeing it now, and I think it's going to be a great game. I hope they win it. I just think good for IU.
Okay, Chap, we're going to transition to NFL here. Let me give you the opportunity to, if you are cool with it, to opine. Now, I want to play for folks what it was that took place in the Jaguars press conference. And you, as somebody who has been around for a long time, I was going to see if you and I can discuss whether or not, because this has become a polarizing subject for fans, which I understand. Liam Cohen is the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were eliminated, obviously, in Jacksonville to the hands of the Buffalo Bills. And afterwards, Lynn Jones of the Jacksonville Free Press News. For those that don't know, in these press conferences, athlete or coach is up at a podium. Usually, media is then seated in seats throughout. They have a microphone. They walk around and pass around oftentimes, and you then say who you are and where you're with, who you're with, and you ask a question. And, Chap, I will play this for folks. This is what took place yesterday.
I want to tell you congratulations on your success, young man.
Thank
you.
you.
Hold your head up, all right? You guys have had a most magnificent season.
Thank
And
you.
did a great job out there today.
Appreciate
so you
it.
just hold your head up, okay?
Thank
and
you,
ladies
ma'am.
and gentlemen, Duval, you the one, all
Thank
right?
you, ma'am.
keep it going. We got another season, okay?
I appreciate
Take
it.
care and much continued success to you and the entire team.
Okay, Chap, I know that a lot of fans see it both ways. Some say, hey, you know what? Maybe she's a fan. She lives in Jacksonville, whatever else. Maybe she simply felt bad for the coach, whatever it may be. Others say, nice sentiment, wrong place, wrong time. Can you, and I'm not asking you to state your opinion on it, but for those that are unfamiliar, as someone who has been in the press corps for a long time with the NFL, is there an expectation or an unwritten rule when you are credentialed into the media of decorum?
Yes, there needs to be. And whether it's my opinion or not, I guess I'll give you my opinion. It was inappropriate. It just time and place. If you have that connection or feeling towards the coach, towards the team, then you wait until he gets off the stage, you find him in the locker room, and then you do that. It's inappropriate. And if that makes me the old man on the porch yelling at people on my lawn, fine. But that's not what it is. We're there to do a job. Can you imagine if one of us on the local media had told Shane, tough season, but boy, stick in there. And no, you can't do that. It's time and place. And it's crazy that it's that polarizing because, well, she's showing sentiment and compassion. That's not the venue. We're there to be as objective as possible. And on the other end, you don't say, boy, you guys were a bunch of hot trash today. What went on? There's ways to do things. There's places to do things. And again, maybe I'm just too old school. I don't think so. I'd like to know what the pro football writers would think about it. I'd like to know what in a clear moment what a team would say about that. It's just inappropriate. Now maybe the team would say it's okay because you're consoling the coach, but I thought it was inappropriate. I'm not going to tear her down for it. I just thought that it showed. I can't imagine. I was thinking, this is terrible. I was thinking of our local media, and I can't think of one person in our media who would say that in that venue. And we've all said and done, ask stupid questions. We do because we do. But that wasn't even a question. That was, oh, by the way, coach, don't let your dauber get down. Inappropriate. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
The reality is, and this is why it's a fascinating story to me. The reality is that we, as we have progressed through technology, I think that those of us and I have to be aware of this, chap. I'm not exonerating this particular situation, but I understand why a lot of people would have less issue with it because of the fact that now, between social media and podcasts and, whether it be TikTok or influencers or whatever else, the lines of the journalism that for so long were right there in the sand, would you agree that they have become blurred? And maybe that's why it's important to step up and say, no, see, this is what we're talking about. But those lines have become blurred to where I think fans that are not those that are getting the credential don't see as much problem with it because there just is not the clear separation between media and fan base like there once was. Is that a fair statement?
Colts PR guy who does a great job. And I think one of his biggest decisions every year is who do you credential? Some guy that's got a podcast, some guy that, doesn't go to games, some guy from New York or Wisconsin or somewhere that's a big Colts fan, but he posts things every day. One thing that I'm pretty sure that Conti does, I'm pretty sure he does this, but once or twice during training camp, there's a day where he lets everybody in. He lets the podcasters in. Can you hear that when that goes off? Holy mackerel! But he lets everybody in because he knows all publicity is good publicity. But you have to have a separation of podcasters and here we are being snooty in credentialed media because there is a difference, and we're not. I'm not a homer for the team. Sometimes I feel like I need to defend the team when somebody goes off half-cocked, and I'm not pointing at you. But I just think there are times that you need to have the objective voice to where I don't have an agenda. Hey, now, this team it's better when they win because it just is. If you're the beat guy. Now, if you're Bob Kravitz and you're a columnist, you love chaos because it just drives your copy. But I think the hardest, yes, there's no question that with today's media, the lines are blurred, which I think makes it more important on who has access. And again, I'm trying to be inclusive to a point. To a point, you have to have a valid forum. You can't be just a fan who has a following of 400 people online. You can't do that. So that's the hardest part. But there needs to be a line. They're just there's no cheering in the press box. Well, that's for a reason. That's for a reason. So I hope that we can still have that line that certainly is blurred. But there's got to be a line. Or what are we doing? So one of these days I'll no longer do this, and then I won't care. But as long as I'm doing it, doggone it, there needs to be some forum to where there is a line, and like I say, Matt Conti will give you 2 days up at Westfield to come up there and get all your interviews. Guys will come up there, and they've got Jonathan Taylor jerseys on, and come on, So I just wish it wasn't that way. It is, and I think the Colts do a very good job. But those guys, but Conti does have a line that normally is not crossed on game day, press box, and every day at the Colts complex. It's a thinner crowd. It's a crowd that has accredited people. I don't know any other way to put it. So there's got to be a line, and I hope that line doesn't get too blurry.
Mike Chappell's my guest. Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Of course, Chap with CBS 4 and WXA and Fox 59. Let's get to the NFL playoffs, Chap. Most impressive performance from a team standpoint of the weekend, in your opinion, was who?
Boy, I like the Rams. I like the Rams. But those were great. The Bears, that's great theater. Is it like 7 games they've won trailing in the last 2 minutes?
Yeah, it's unreal.
That's great. That's not sustainable. It's not. I still like the Rams. I'm not sold on New England. I'm not. I think Houston's going to blow the doors off of Aaron Rodgers tonight. I like the Rams, what I've seen, and then individually, Josh Allen is like a cockroach. You can't kill him. You can't. I think it's great stuff so far, and going forward, it's just going to be great theater, and then, oh, by the way, you got Philadelphia. What the hell are they going to do? So it's really interesting stuff. But I really am impressed by the Rams and the way they came back.
I think San Francisco's impressive. And if I'm Seattle, I would be very worried about, the way that those two just played each other, obviously. In San Francisco, I know Kittle went down. I know that they have been decimated by injury, but they just keep finding a way. Is San Francisco kind of lurking in the weeds?
Yeah, and that's another one where I'm late to be on a Josh Purdy fan. There's always something I think is missing, and then he makes these plays, and their running game's not very good. McCaffrey's averaging like 3.9 a carry, yet he makes plays in the pass game. They find ways. At some point, the injuries are going to matter. Losing Kittle's a big deal. It really is. But I tell you, when you get teams that find ways, we talked the last week or two about the Colts found ways to lose. Now you're seeing that how it is when teams find a way to win. And that's what Frisco does. It's like the Bears. I'm not sure how it's sustainable when you keep losing. They're not losing their backup tackle. They're losing George Kittle. So, but yeah, it was a great weekend. I have a low bar for tonight because I don't like Pittsburgh. I think they've defined mediocrity. So, but so far so good.
Chap, a lot of times I'll watch, whether it be the college playoffs, the Final Four, whatever it may be. There are a lot of times where I watch in the playoffs or in the postseason, and if the team that I pull for or watch regularly is not involved, then it will suddenly, that's where I will really see the gap between, say the Colts and the teams that are in the postseason. Is there a gap? I mean, obviously there's a gap because the Colts, we know what happened at the end of the year, but Daniel Jones was, we talked about all that. But when you look at it, does it remind you that they are simply health away from being competitive, or did the postseason to you show a gap that reminds you how far away they are?
Well, how far is a relative term, but they're not there. I looked last night, with the Niners make that the last stop, and they win the game. And I'm thinking, where was that for the Colts? Where was that one stop in Seattle, that one stop in Kansas City, and even Jacksonville? Where was that one stop? And, the injury thing, everybody has it, but the one thing I do push back on is losing Daniel Jones was not the same.
Did we lose Chap, Nathaniel?
Yeah, looks like it. Chap?
All right.
Hello?
We lost Mike Chappell. We'll try to reconnect with Chap. But, yes, I think that when you look at – and that's to me, admittedly, I mean, speaking of Indiana, for years when I would go down to, like, Clemson games and I would say there's just such a gap between the speed and the level of play between an Indiana and then, say, a Clemson or an Alabama going back, 5-6 years ago. And, for Purdue, that – the same. And I did see Purdue. I was looking last night at some recruiting aspects for Purdue. I think that they may be somewhat like headed towards the right direction in trying to build a foundation, but speed in general at the college level, I would look at between saying the Big Ten schools and then those others, and it is very bizarre to think that Indiana is now the one that is setting that pace. But from the NFL standpoint, Chap, as you were saying, Jones, I guess we go back to that. Just so much of it depends, does it not, on whether or not Daniel Jones is healthy and when they will be able to assess whether or not he's healthy for next year, week one, right?
Everything does. Everything that's going to happen next year is dependent on Daniel Jones. It just is. They are as convinced as they can be in January that he's going to be ready in June or July. For the start of training camp, at what level, we'll see. But if not Daniel Jones, who? On the other right, Leonard came in and played pretty well, but I don't think they believe he's ready to play a month. So everything's on his health, and there's a lot of reasons to say, oh boy, you're putting all your eggs in that basket, an Achilles, from a guy who's I think he's finished 3 of his 7 years on IR with injuries. So it's all on him. Whatever else they do in the off season, they're going to re-sign Jones. They are. It just depends on the money. And I am as convinced as I can be they're going to re-sign Alec Pierce. Although, boy, Josh Allen has to say, I wouldn't mind having Alec Pierce in Buffalo right now. I don't see any way this team allows Alec Pierce to sniff the open market. I just don't see it. But it all depends on the quarterback. And if he comes back and plays like he did the first 10 games, then they're in good shape because they're going to, I won't say blow up the defense, but we may not recognize the front 7 next year because they're going to make changes, which they need to. So, but it's all in the quarterback, and I understand everyone's angst over that because he's got an Achilles, and we've seen guys not be the same, certainly initially, after an Achilles.
Mike Chappell is my guest, Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Chap, one other thing I wanted to touch on before we let you go here, and appreciate the time. You talked about Josh Allen in Buffalo. That play, and it was impressive. They had a 4th and 1, and I can't remember if they scored a touchdown or down at like the half-yard line. But basically, Josh Allen, who is a super strong between the tackle guy, I get it. But his line basically picked him up and carried him for like 7 yards.
Not good.
Yeah, are they going to have to revisit that?
Yeah, that's the version of the tush push, but that's you can't pick a guy. You're not supposed to be able to pick a guy up and carry him, for crying out loud. And that's something I would hope. Is that a football play? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't like it. But it's been 2 or 3 years that they've sort of fought back, and they've not gotten enough endorsement to ban that play. But that's not a good play. I mean, it just isn't. And then there's been a play or two. I think it was with the Eagles several weeks ago where they ran that, and then I think Jalen Hurts fumbled the ball. And did it happen for momentum stopped or whatever? So it's just not a clean play, and I hope they do something to adjust teams running that kind of a play.
Mike Chappell, we will continue to monitor what happens here in terms of any storylines with the Colts. Probably talk to you again throughout the course of the playoffs, and we will hold you to tonight's prediction that Houston will take care of business against Pittsburgh.
Big time.
Big time, he says. All right. Appreciate it, Chap.
Later.
All right, Mike Chappell joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. You saw the play, Nathaniel, right? I mean, Allen goes for a sneak, and it was an unbelievable play until you watch the replay, and you're like, his lineman basically picked him up, and they were like carrying him. I don't know how else to describe it, right? I mean, it looked like some sort of a fireman drill. Impressive, but at the same time, you're like, I don't know, because that was, at one time I think outlawed and then brought back from the college team. Outlawed's the wrong word. Illegal and then brought back from a college standpoint, etc. But that was a great listen. Buffalo to me is fascinating because seemingly each time that I have watched Buffalo this year, they've lost. It feels almost like there was all this hope and expectation around Buffalo going into the season. And then maybe it's because I categorize them in my mind like I do the Detroit Lions. And because Detroit's season went south, I just assumed that Buffalo's kind of had as well. And because the Bills were not the dominant team within their division or conference. But I think most people would still tell you that they anticipate Buffalo as the AFC. I think they're the favorite in the AFC for most people. I think most people would say, if you took a survey, that Buffalo is the team. That would be the most common answer of one that people assume is going to get into the Super Bowl. When we return, he is the National Sportscaster of the Year. He was on the microphone for Indiana's win over Oregon. And Sean McDonough joins us next.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
There were several things that perhaps surprised folks about the Indiana-Oregon game on Friday evening, notably the way in which that game went from the score standpoint, let's be real. Secondly, obviously, just the incredulous nature of having Indiana playing for a national championship. And third, perhaps the quick pounce that Indiana had on Oregon, much to the delight of the 90% of the fans at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But one of the more fun curveballs that took place in the game is when they went to the booth and Sean McDonough was under the assumption that he was getting ready to talk about the Oregon Ducks. And at that point, it was his colleague Greg McElroy who took the opportunity to congratulate him on being named the National Sports Media National Sportscaster of the Year. And when you are a sportscaster, it is your job to always know what to say. And I thought it was a poignant moment that Sean McDonough in that second kind of clearly did not. But it is a well-earned honor. He joins us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line after the call in that game. Sean, that caught you off guard a little bit, did it not?
Yes, it did. Thank you, Jake. It did. I wasn't expecting it. It was very nice of Greg and our crew to want to mention it. It was a little uncomfortable for me because I've always said, people don't tune in. It's not about us. They don't tune in to watch us, the announcers. They tune in to watch the game. So I've always tried never to make it about myself. But in that instance, I guess I could allow it because it wasn't my choice. But I appreciate it. It was very heartfelt from Greg. He and I have become really close friends, and I think he was happier for me about the whole thing than I was. So it was a nice moment. I did try to kind of steer it quickly back to the game, but it was nice of them, and I appreciate you bringing it up too.
Well, it was a well-earned honor, no question about that. I want to get to the matchup here, and before we go back to kind of revisit the Oregon game, for Indiana fans that might be unfamiliar, Miami is obviously an illustrious program, but coming out of the ACC, not as much discussion about them after the Notre Dame game at the beginning of the year from a local standpoint, I simply mean. But you saw them against Texas A&M. Can you kind of preview for folks or let Indiana fans know the strength of what they're going up against with the Hurricanes?
Well, I think the number one strength is their play along both lines of scrimmage. As a matter of fact, when we did that season opener in Miami against Notre Dame was considered to have one of the best offensive lines in the country coming in to the season. And, that night they really got outplayed by the defensive line. Now, you can understand why when you've watched Miami play since, particularly in this playoff. I mean, they have two defensive ends in Bain and Mesidor who are going to be first-round picks and are probably moving up on draft boards with the way they've played. So, I think that's the biggest strength of Miami. They have a bunch of other strengths, too. I think they're very well coached. Obviously, they have a veteran quarterback who I think is also a nice comeback story in Carson Beck and what he's accomplished this year. They're capable of winning. It's just hard, when you watch the surgical precision with which Indiana is annihilating good teams like Alabama and Oregon. I think I said at one point during the game Friday night, you wonder as we were going to the half, you wonder what the Miami Hurricanes are thinking watching this right now. But they're a good team. It's just hard because Indiana, as we talked about a lot the other night, doesn't beat itself. So, you have to play, you'd have to play your best anyway to beat a team like Indiana. But you better do it because they're not going to hand you the game, that's for sure.
It's one of the things about Indiana, to your point, Sean, and you are correct. I have said it's almost like the blueprint for Indiana is, look, we're just going to go out and not make mistakes, and then that way if you make a mistake, then we win because you made a mistake and we didn't. I mean, it seems like that's their mantra going in, right? Is Miami a team that is susceptible to lapses or turnovers?
Yeah, but I don't think alarmingly so. I think if you don't get to this point. As a matter of fact, I was kind of surprised. Texas A&M, I believe they were something like -8 or -9 when we had them, which would be unusual for a playoff team in terms of the turnover margin. So, they have had, Malachi Tony, who's their terrific freshman wide receiver. He's put the ball on the ground a couple times in this playoff, notably the other night. In their win against Ole Miss, it bounced back to them. But, I don't think they're going to be a big turnover team. They did manage to win the game in the semifinal despite committing 10 penalties, which really helped keep Ole Miss in it because I think most people thought Miami really controls the play through most of it. I believe the time of possession was something like 42 minutes. So they're a very good team, but if you're waiting for Indiana to help you by turning the ball over, getting a lot of penalties, you're just not going to do it.
Sean McDonough is my guest. Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Of course, he is the National Sports Broadcaster of the Year and Sportscaster of the Year on ESPN. He was on the call for Indiana and Oregon. Sean, the front four defensively of Miami from when I have seen them, and I've watched them off and on throughout the course of the year, that front four defensively for Miami looks pretty nasty from what I can tell. Who has the better defensive line, Indiana or Miami?
Well, I would say if there's one place where Miami would have the edge, it's probably there. To diminish the quality of the Indiana defensive line, I think we saw how disruptive they could be the other night. Collectively, not just the defensive line for Indiana, but with how well coached they are and with the pressures they bring from time to time. They lose Stephen Daly, and then Nzukwe jumps in. I think he had 8 or 9 tackles the whole year. He wound up being one of the stars of the game, had a couple sacks, blocked the punt. So, there's strength in numbers in that Indiana defensive line. But I don't think anybody in the country has as good a defensive line as Miami. As we said, Reuben Bain and Mesidor are going to be, 2 first-round picks. And, they're dangerous, too, because they're not just ends. Sometimes they'll move them inside. Sometimes they line up next to each other. Corey Hennon, who's the defensive coordinator for Miami, has done a great job. He's in his first year there. He basically cut the points per game in half. I mean, last year they had the number one offense in the country. They had Cam Ward, a quarterback. He wound up being the first pick in the NFL draft, but the defense wasn't strong enough to get them into the playoff. This year they're much better defensively. But, yeah, I'd give the edge there. Now, Indiana has a terrific offensive line, so it'll be a great test. They're a Joe Moore Award finalist, as you know, Jake. And then the other part of it is they just do so great a job, Indiana, of getting the ball out quickly.
Yep.
Mendoza doesn't hold on to the ball. He throws it quickly, and if he can't find somebody, he tries to pull it down and run. And I think that's a part of his game that's now finally starting to get enough attention, his ability to hurt you when he pulls it down and runs, or on the very occasional design run.
I understand, Sean, the 5-star high school players that are elite level talents, you're always going to want those players. That's never going to go away. But when you look at Indiana and the number of transfers, the number of 5th and 6th year players that are there, and Curt Cignetti going with, production over potential. And then you look at Miami, for that matter, with a guy that's in his 6th season, and back at the quarterback position as well. Is this kind of a boulder in the stream, maybe temporarily, but in terms of blueprint of building a program, the way that the transfer portal has taken place for Indiana?
Yeah, I think it is a blueprint, pardon me, and I think it got accelerated, obviously, by the fact that he was able to bring 13 terrific football players with him from James Madison. Matter of fact, I think it's probably been undertold what a great job Bob Chesney did the last 2 years at James Madison, given that, he took over what's been a really strong program. It was under Cignetti, and it was before Kurt got to JMU. It's actually probably the only place of the 4 that Kurt coached, has been the head coach, where they were actually in good shape before he got there. And did a fantastic job. Obviously, JMU was in the playoffs this year. But, yeah, I think the transfer portal, it has to be a blend, right? You have to recruit high school players and do well with that. But I think you need to identify the right people in the portal, and you need to have the money to go out and get them, because that's really the deciding thing. Most of these guys now are just transferring to wherever they're going to get the most money, or coming out of high school at the place where they think they can get the most money. So you have to have donors who are willing to give you the money, and then you need to spend it on the right people. And, Indiana has all of that.
Lastly, Sean, and I appreciate the time, from a national perspective, we in Indiana, I went to Indiana, I was a student there back in the days of, going to the Pull-On Weed Eater Independence Bowl was worthy of buying a T-shirt about it, right? So, this, as Don Fisher said, turnaround's almost not even a big enough word. But this storyline, in Indiana, we are completely caught up in, just the unbelievable nature of it. From a national standpoint, from a national perspective, what is the overall, just absorption of this Indiana tale? And is there anything by which you can compare?
No. To answer the last part of that first, and we talked in our production meeting about that. I talked to our researchers. I asked the terrific Indiana sports information people in our meetings with them, because I'm sure they've been asked for comparisons or they've done research into it. And they pointed to what Bill Snyder did at Kansas State. They were the worst football program in college football. He made them a consistent winner, but it wasn't overnight. And Wisconsin, they pointed at before Barry Alvarez got there, it was down, but it still isn't like this. And, I think America is captivated by it. And, it's ordinarily when you have a blowout, we don't enjoy that on TV. It's, you like a competitive game, everybody does, and makes our job a little easier. But it didn't really bother me the other night, because I just think it became an appreciation of the excellence of the Indiana football program. And, and we tried to chronicle all the facets of that. Not just Natty, but, he has a terrific staff. Those coordinators have been with him at every stop. They're a huge part of it, as are the other assistant coaches. All the support people, the support of the administration. I mean, that's one of the reasons Sig went there, is he did believe that they would be committed to trying to have an outstanding football program and not just be a basketball school. And obviously the fans are a big part of it, the way they took over the other night. Fernando Mendoza, I don't think America can get enough of him and his story and how graciously, he is living in the magnitude of his celebrity right now, and obviously raised right by wonderful parents. It's such a heartfelt story when we kept having shots in the commercials of the dad helping his mom, Mrs. Mendoza, put her sweater on or take it back off. And, it's just the whole thing. It's a wonderful story, and we'll see if they can write the final chapter by having the undefeated season in Mendoza's hometown.
Just remember, Sean, if Indiana goes 16-0, the first team to win 16 games in a season in college football, if they go 16-0, all they have to do, Sean, all Indiana has to do is go 16-0 for another 11 consecutive seasons, and then in year 12 start 7-0, and they'll be back to a game over 500 as a program.
Wasn't that something? I mean, I think we said the thing the other night. They're 3-0 against top 5 teams, and before this year, 1-72. So I mean, it's
yeah.
unbelievable. There's so many. I mean, you could spend all day going through notes and stuff like that. Somebody sent me a meme, and you might have seen it. It was talking to Tom Osborne and saying, like, hey, you're not going to believe this, right? Now, Indiana's a football school, and Nebraska's become a basketball
That's
school
right.
all of a sudden. So,
I know. It's crazy. Absolutely
you never know.
Crazy.
But it's a great story, and I'm happy for all the people involved. A lot of hard work's gone into it, a lot of really nice people. They're really a pleasure to talk to their coaching staff and players the other day when we were in Atlanta, and I'm happy for all their success.
Well, Sean, we certainly appreciate you making time for us today. And again, congratulations on understandably and rightly being named the National Sportscaster of the Year. Great call for Indiana fans in that game against Oregon. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Jake. My pleasure.
Appreciate it. Sean McDonough joining us on the Java House Peel and Port Guest Line. Again, javahouse.com is the website. Whether it is the amazingly smooth Colombian coffee, the Wrangler Energy, or the Liquid Science Hydration, any of it. Very easy peel and pour. Put it right there in 8 ounces of water and beverage. That includes teas, by the way, black tea, peach tea, the rest. But simply go to javahouse.com, use the code JAKE25, and you get 25% off. All right, back on it from a basketball standpoint. Little round ball to talk about. We'll do it on the other side here. Query & Company on the Fan. Hey there, Jake Query for Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com is the website. 317-353-2141 is the telephone number for Love Heating and Air, an official Heil Heating and Cooling dealer. And I've known him my entire life. As a matter of fact, was just over at my folks' house the other day. My mom and I were talking about the fact that Chris and John love two guys that used to run around inside that house when we were kids and now coming over and helping out my parents with their furnace and doing a great job. And my mom was saying, it's just wonderful because we've not had any issue, but there's a peace of mind, and there is for me as well, of knowing that should there be a problem, Love Heating and Air has that 24-hour on-call maintenance where they come and they take care of you. This time of year when all of a sudden it's getting cold, middle of the night, furnace goes out. That is so incredibly important. And they treat you like family with the best customer service and quality of product and price of product. That's everything you get from Love Heating and Air. 317-353-2141 or love-hvac.com.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Pacers in action tonight, taking on the Boston Celtics. Jaylen Brown, by the way, questionable. He's got lower back spasms. If that's the case, I've been questionable since like 2009. Being 6'4" has its disadvantages. I can only imagine being 6'9" or whatever Jaylen Brown is, who I think is a phenomenal player, by the way. Huge fan of Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen Brown also, like, genius level, right? Isn't he? He's considered like, IQ of 165 and invents stuff in the offseason and, SpaceX level brainiac, Jaylen Brown. Wonderful player, though. We'll see if he plays tonight. But the Pacers coming off a huge win against Miami on Saturday. Saturday night, actually, so I didn't see the game. I wasn't at the game. Going tonight, but Not that anybody cares, but I'll just simply mention. So Shannon, has and is fortunate enough to get season tickets, but her brother and nephew's girlfriend, they were all in town from Denver, so they went to the game. So we actually went down to Bottle Works to the garage, and which I have done before, and was there at Axel's with Mick Ultra as part of our Mini Hoops Challenge last week and had so much fun that I said, you know what, let's go back and just eat there and get a beer and walk around. So we did that and then walked down Mass Ave to Chatham Tap. And the game was on. I also saw, the Rams-Panthers game was winding up as well. They had both TVs going. My point simply here being, I love Indy. I love everything about Indianapolis, and I love going out to the different areas of Indianapolis. When I lived in New York City, one of the great things about New York City was you could go to any area of New York City and find a new bar, a new barbershop, a new, shoe cobbler, whatever. Like there are 150,000 different little neighborhoods in New York City, and each time you discover a new neighborhood and get into the mode of that neighborhood, it's like you'd forgotten about the neighborhood you were in before, or the one you're going to be in next, or whatever else. They all are each their own little thing. And last night I was looking through, the Indianapolis Star had a photo archive of Indianapolis over the decades, and I was looking at the one from the 80s, and there was a picture of Mass Ave from 1982. You could see Old Point there, but it's where the Dancing Woman would now be, where Brewburger's right there on the left. And it's unrecognizable compared to today. And just walking from the garage and then walking around past the hotel and then back down towards Chatham Tap, that whole little area right there is just another one of those. And I've been there. I mean, it's not like it was new to me, but it just reminded me of some of the different, very cool things that we have here in Indy. And as I've always said, and I know I'm biased because I'm from here, but considering that we are a city that was created because it was a crossroad between the stockyards of the West and the industry of Chicago, and it was strictly a stopover to hang a left, and we have no ocean, we have no mountains, and for the most part, we have no natural lakes around, we've done a pretty good job. Done a pretty good job building a pretty cool area. But it was very cool walking around there, and I just thought, man, it'd be so fun to just stay the night some night in the hotel right there and just do a pub crawl, whatever. It'd be a lot of fun. But in watching the game, that was the first time this year that seemingly we have seen a glimpse of the Pacers of a year ago. And Nembhard is a big part of that. But they're starting to get play from other players. I think having Nesmith back is big as well because he just brings a stability to them. And the Pacers absolutely need to get, and I don't know at this point that, maybe at this point they are what they are. But Jarris Walker, he was good in that game, right? Good Jarris. But and maybe we need to now accept the fact that Jarris Walker is a perfectly fine NBA player if you don't consider what it was you were hoping he was going to be when he was drafted within the top 10. And if you look at it and simply say, you know what? If he's going to be a 10 to 15 point, 4 to 6 rebound, solid 18 minutes off the bench kind of guy, they could use that. And you just burn the fact that, okay, but we'll forget about the fact that when he was taken 6th or 8th or whatever it was that he was taken, you wanted more at that time. Another guy that I'm curious about is Micah Potter because he plays well for them and he can hit shots for them. But where I have been victim in the past and where I at times am naive is I oftentimes look at production from guys and think that means that they are, long-term run with them guys. And then you have to look at it and say, no, they're getting those minutes and they're getting those points because they are in a system right now where someone needs to get those minutes and points. But in meaningful, impactful, late playoff Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals moments, are they then guys you run with? Or is that a whole different animal? And I don't know. I do feel like Jay Huff, with his ability, and he continues to almost toy with me because he always hits the first two games. Like, if you go to a Pacer game, this didn't happen on Saturday, but if you go to a game and you're wagering with your buddies there, wager that Jay Huff hits his first two threes and they're going to be within the first 8 minutes of the game. And then after that, the three kind of goes away from him. But when, and I'll say when, not if, when they get their Miles Turner replacement, and I think that comes via trade, when they get, whether it's Zubac, whether it's Mark Williams, whoever it might be, when they get that player, then I think Jay Huff becomes a really nice rotational 15 to 18-minute guy. And he has shown that. Isaiah Jackson, I love Isaiah Jackson, but the health has just really held him back a little bit from really getting a full understanding of who and what he can be. And then, Ethan Thompson, is he just a guy that's logging minutes because somebody has to? That's possible. But tonight against the Celtics, we'll see if Indiana can get their third straight. Don't screw it up, though. They've still got a really good chance at a top three player that could be a huge difference and allow them to trade Mathurin. I'll simply say that. Bill Benner, long-time Indiana football fan, basking in the glory of back-to-back road trips for Bill and his family. And we'll talk to him about what all of this means next.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You know what? Just to get Bill Benner fired up, Nathaniel, do you happen to have the open that we did at 12 o'clock? Where we can hear, because I believe Bill Benner was at the game and probably did not hear the dulcet tones of Don Fisher. It is 60 seconds of bliss. Can we play for Bill the open from the top in looking back at Indiana's win against Oregon? Here we go. Indiana on their way to Miami. And when you think about making the pilgrimage, paying the ticket prices, sitting in the sun in Miami Gardens, maybe it'll be in the rain. But you know what? The Colts won a Super Bowl in the rain in Miami. Indiana, it was raining in Atlanta before they played Oregon. It was raining in the Rose Bowl before they played Alabama. So if it rains, that's also good news. But a guy that sat through plenty of rainstorms, snowstorms, cloudy days, dark days with Indiana football, the former Indianapolis Star columnist Bill Benner joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Bill, are you on cloud 8 or cloud 7 or still hanging around on cloud 9?
No, I think it's about cloud 14 right now. Well, no, you know what? It would be cloud 15.
There you go. Soon to be cloud 16, right?
Yeah. We certainly hope so. And I've told other people, even as a former wordsmith, I still run out of words to describe what I've witnessed to capture the essence of this incredible rags to riches story, unlike any ever in the world of, certainly in the world of collegiate sport. It's and college football. There's nothing can compare, especially if Indiana closes it out.
Okay, are you going, by the way, to Miami, Bill?
Yes, sir. We have. I actually booked flights a couple of weeks ago, and so we're flying into Fort Lauderdale, in and out of Fort Lauderdale. Leave Saturday and come back on Tuesday.
Okay, so let's get to this. And I wanted to have you on because, and I know that we can sit here and talk, and we will, about what Indiana has done to get to this point. But I want to further elaborate because I don't know that we can overstate where it is that they were and why it is so incredible. What was the first year, Bill, when you attended an Indiana football game?
1964, I was a sophomore on the Center Grove band, in the Center Grove band, and they had band day. And so that was my first IU football game. I believe it was a Mid-American. It might have been Miami of Ohio that Indiana played. It was a sun splashed day. It was, but you know, I've always, and again, not to sacrifice my objectivity when I was a columnist, but my farmhouse growing up sat on a small bluff that overlooked Indiana 37. The first team that I could remember listening to on the radio was the 1953 National Championship Hoosiers. I was 5 or 6 years old. 6 years old, and so I always wanted to go to. I always wanted to go to IU, and it was never any doubt. I didn't have any money, and so I ended up at the IU extension, the forerunner to IUPUI, the first 2 years. That turned out to be an incredible break because, as you know, Jake, I got a start as a score boy at the Indianapolis Star, and shortly thereafter I was able to move over to the sports department and begin my sports journalism career. I finished my last 2 years down in Bloomington and certainly went to every football game that I could. I continued to go to football games as I covered high schools and the Pacers. But then when I became and covered intercollegiate athletics, that included Purdue and Notre Dame and Ball State and Indiana State, whomever, certainly during that period and when I became columnist, my infatuation with Indiana football and certainly my infatuation decreased and my objectivity increased proportionally.
What was the lowest point?
Oh boy, there's been so many of them. I recall, and I may have related this to you before. Indiana lost to Rutgers. This was about I don't know, 2016, and Rutgers was nothing to talk about. But it was like 58-55 or something like that, and Indiana had blown the lead. And I got into the car, and God loved Don Fisher, as we all do. But I turned to Sherry, and I said, we are not listening to any of the postgame, and we are turning off the radio, and we are driving in silence till at least we get to 465, because I was so pissed. I was so aggravated. And so we just sat in silence all the way. But there are a number of times when Sherry and I looked at each other on the way home from another disheartening defeat, and we just go, why do we do this? Well, the reason why is because it's become part of our lives. And we have friends. I told you about the longtime friend and co-season ticket holder I have from Connorsville. This is because it's become part of our lives. So you cherish the wins, and you hope for, after the losses, you hope for a better game next week, and you just kind of ride with it.
I was talking earlier, Bill Benner's my guest. He's on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, the former Indianapolis Star columnist. And is it okay if I call you Indiana football super fan in your retired life, Bill? Is that okay?
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah.
I was talking to Sean McDonough about this, and, I mentioned earlier, Bill, and I want you to tell me if you disagree with this, okay? Because maybe I'm grasping at a straw here. I'm the same high school graduating class as the Fab Five at Michigan, okay? Juwan Howard, Chris Webber, Jalen Rose, Ray Jackson, Jimmy King.
Yeah.
And not only were they revolutionary or groundbreaking, I guess is a better way of saying it, because of the baggy shorts and the black socks, but it was the fact that it was unique and it was unprecedented to see 5 freshmen take college basketball by storm and have success immediately, go to the championship game as freshmen. It just was so unheard of. And that led to, even though we were already kind of there, but that led to then the 5-star recruiting cap, putting the cap on and all of that in recruiting services and et cetera. Are we seeing now, Bill, is it possible that what we're seeing is a watershed moment in terms of the architecture of college football? Because Curt Cignetti has said, at this point, I don't have the 5-star recruits, so I'm going with productivity over potential. And I'm going to go out and build a roster in the transfer portal era of guys that have maturity, discipline, and experience. And we are seeing the fruits of that labor with this veteran team, even though they didn't all play together, mature team. Is this now going to be the blueprint that will be copycatted around college football?
Well, it would be copycatted if you could, but not everybody will be able to do so. I think the NIL, the portal area, is still evolving. Absolutely, Indiana has struck it beyond rich with Cignetti and his staff and his character development and his identification of not just a football player, a physical football player, but of the character of that young man and the character that can lead to an untapped potential. I think that's what we've seen up and down this roster. Charlie Becker. Charlie Becker would be a classic example of a young man, well, and we talk about Mendoza, but a young man who was mostly overlooked, but Signetti has, and his staff, and whomever has made the initial contact with these young fellas, they've identified the character that, again, allows for the development of that untapped potential. And so whether other programs such as Indiana, such as we've seen some at Vanderbilt, other perennial losers can use this model to drag themselves up. I read a story today about Mike Bobinski talking about Purdue and how Purdue. This is the model that we need to see if we can tap into this kind of model at Purdue. So Indiana, it's easy to say, yes, I'm going to copy what Indiana has done. It will be far less easy and less widespread in the teams and programs that are able to do it.
Bill, when's the last time you cried in sport? When's the last time a sporting event made you cry?
Rose Bowl.
Okay.
Rose Bowl. I did not get emotional at the Peach Bowl because it was it was such a butt kicking. Not that the Alabama wasn't a butt kicking, but the specter of the Rose Bowl and the fact that I'd never been there as a fan. I covered Purdue when they played there in 2001, and I covered 5 or 6 Rose Bowls. But as that game ended and the environment of the Rose Bowl and the fact that Indiana had beaten Alabama so soundly, and all the IU fans around me enjoying and cherishing that same moment, including my wife sitting next to me. I'll get emotional as I talk about this. My wife and close friends sitting next to me. I got emotional at the end of the Rose Bowl, and I also got emotional at the end of the Big Ten championship game when they beat Ohio State, and we knew then that by beating Ohio State, we were going to return to the Rose Bowl for the first time since I was a teenager.
Well, listen, I cried just by watching Ohio State fans cry, so that was cool, right? I mean, you know what I mean. So that was an automatic to happen in that situation. Bill Benner, my guest, Java House Peel and Pour guest line. So, Bill, I think it's safe to say then, if Indiana is to finish this off, and I think they will, but there's a game to be played, you will cry like a baby, correct?
Not sure I'll cry like a baby, but I'm sure I will well up with tears. But, I tell everybody, I never look further ahead than the next play, the next kickoff. And so I'm not looking any further ahead than the opening kickoff against Miami on their home field, even though Indiana will be the home team. And I certainly respect Miami and what they've accomplished, just as I respected Alabama and I respected Ohio State and I respected that team, the Oregon Ducks that showed up on Saturday night, or Friday night. So I don't allow myself to get too far down the road, but if that moment comes, I will certainly be emotional.
If you got to pick, Bill, I thought about this, and I have a conflicting answer here. If you got to pick, because they've worn so many different ones over the course of the last handful of years, if they came to you and they said, Bill Benner, longtime football supporter, we are going to allow you to select which jersey and which helmet Indiana wears in the national championship game, which vintage are you going with?
Well, I would go the current vintage. I love their uniforms. The fact that they say Hoosiers on the front. I like these helmets with the IU, and so I would be more than fine with the current vintage. Yes,
because we all go back to, like, I get nostalgic from a childhood standpoint, and I think about even the Anthony Thompson era, the true crimson with the white eye on it, and then Hoosiers on the jersey. And then I also like, even in the Corso era, the more like cherry red with the white eye. And then I think to myself, but this is a different culture and a different atmosphere and a different attitude of Indiana football. So you got to go with what's worked, right? You got to go with the variation of the current. So I understand that. I did want to ask you this before we let you go, Bill. Much has been made and much will be made about the fact that Indiana has a chance to be the first 16-0 team in college football. They will be the most recent undefeated if they were to win. And, of course, the last team to do that in basketball is the 76 Hoosiers, and this the 50-year mark of that. That team was unblemished in the 75 regular season, and so there was a lot of expectation, I'm sure. I was just a kid then, but I am curious by your recollection, how much was the undefeated nature discussed for the 76 basketball team throughout the course of the year? And how big was it in anticipation going into that final against Michigan of the 32-0? Or was there even the expectation that in 2026 we would still be talking about that being the last one? Was it that incredibly unique coming off of the UCLA dynasty and everything else?
Well, again, going back in history, they should have won it all in 75, and had Scott May not broken his arm, because that team was, as many people have speculated over the years, that team might have been a little bit better than even the 76 team. But and God, Jake, I am so blessed. Like Don Fisher, I was there. I got to write the sidebar for the Indianapolis Star in 1976 when Indiana closed out that perfect basketball season. And so I'm going to be, there as they maybe close out this perfect football season 50 years later. How blessed and fortunate I am to have those two events happen within my lifetime, and to have been personally involved and witnessed. I mean, it makes my heart. So you talk about getting emotional, Jake. The thought of that gets me emotional. But back to the 76 team, it was. I don't want to say it was expected. They barely survived Michigan. Thank goodness for Wayne Radford and Ken Benson in Assembly Hall. But that team was so good, so good. I used to tell people that Bobby Wilkerson and Quinn Buckner would pick you up in Martinsville and guard you all the way to Bedford. And then Kent Benson and Scotty May, I mean, that team had all the components. And even though we had our disagreements as history would unfold, Bob Knight was a hell of a coach, and he was Bob Knight. So, but that was more or less expected. If you can expect an unbeaten season. What has transpired, again, for an Indiana football program that, as many have pointed out, was, prior to the season, the losingest in major college history. For them to evolve this fast and become the number one team in the nation, 25-2 under Signetti, it's just... Once again, the wordsmith has no words.
I would imagine that it has to be fewer than 50. I'm just going to throw that number out. The number of people that will be able to say, should Indiana close this out, I don't want to jinx anything, but the number of people that would have been physically in attendance in the Spectrum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on March 29th of 76, when Indiana defeated Michigan 86-68 to go 32-0, and the number of people that would be there to see the football team do the same 50 years later. Has to be, I'd go fewer than 50, but nonetheless, Bill Benner there. Bill, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to say when. I will say if Indiana wins. We look forward to talking to you next week and getting you all choked up into a blubbering mess talking about the Indiana Hoosiers as the national champions.
I'll be there for you, Jake. And again, I'm so honored that you would think of me and have me on. And go Hoosiers.
Appreciate it, Bill. Bill Bitter joining us, Java House Peel and Pour guest line. It is remarkable. Chris Hagan had asked me how many people can say that they have been to every NBA Finals game that the Indiana Pacers have played. Hagan is one of them because he covered all of the games for the Lakers and Pacers series in 2000 and covered all of the games for the Oklahoma City Thunder Pacers series. And we came up with an extremely short list. And I can imagine, and that's only a 25-year gap. So I can only imagine how hard it would be to come up with a list of people that would have been on both sides of it from a basketball and football standpoint in the 50-year gap between those two. And it really is remarkable. Now, again, historically, and you'll hear much mention of this over the course of the week, UCLA, the best way to say it is the way Mike Hall said it on the Big Ten Network. If Indiana is able to win next Monday or, Monday night, a week from tonight, then Indiana would be the most recent undefeated champion in both sports, which is remarkable. But in football, it is obviously more common. It is the fact that in basketball, for all of this time, every year, I can tell you right now, Nathaniel, do me a favor, please, and pull up the current rankings in college basketball if you could. Go to probably ESPN.com and pull up the college basketball rankings. And I am like, Indiana fans have to do this more than any other sport. Let me know when you have it pulled up before you. I'm going to read off to you all of the undefeated teams remaining in college basketball. And
Okay,
I didn't see scores really over the weekend from a national standpoint, so I might be missing a few here. But Nebraska is undefeated, correct?
Correct.
Arizona is undefeated, correct?
And ranked number 1.
Vanderbilt undefeated, correct?
Second best start in program history.
And I believe Miami of Ohio is undefeated or was going into the weekend. Now, whether or not they, slipped up and lost to Toledo, I don't know. But Miami of Ohio. Now, are there any other schools that I'm missing?
Yeah, they beat the Boilers.
The team that's undefeated that beat? Oh, Iowa State is still undefeated?
They are.
Okay.
Surprising. Number 2.
So Iowa State so Arizona's now in the Big 12, right? They play one another.
Yes, that's right.
So they will cancel each other out. So one of those two could remain undefeated in the regular season, but Vanderbilt then would have to slip up in the SEC and Miami of Ohio in the MAC. Is that it? That's all of them, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. In college basketball, I have always paid attention to that because every year I think, and I've always loved the fact that Indiana was the last unbeaten. It is just such a special thing for Indiana people. When Kentucky came here and the year that they thought they were going to go 40-0 and they had the T-shirts and everything else, and Wisconsin upset them in the semis, you almost forget that Wisconsin had to go play Duke after that because it feels like Wisconsin won the Nat. That's the most memorable thing of that Final Four, in particular because it was in Indianapolis and Indiana fans were so keenly, like myself, keeping an eye on what was going to happen for whether or not Indiana would remain the last unbeaten. And every year I look at that. Every year I look to see who's the last unbeaten. Gonzaga. I thought for sure Gonzaga was going to do it. And lo and behold, Gonzaga gets beat by Baylor, right? It is inconceivable because all I wanted was to see Indiana be the last one for 50 years. And it is inconceivable to think of all of the teams that I thought could potentially go undefeated in college basketball to match 76 Indiana, I never would have guessed that there was the possibility that their football program would actually be doing it in the 50-year anniversary. I get it. I get the fact that People are probably worn out of hearing about it. I get it. But it is unbelievable. Larry from KSR. By the way, KSR, the best wings, and their beer is ice cold at 71st and Keystone. Ice cold. Larry points out UNLV of the 90s. Absolutely. UNLV in 90 was beaten by Arkansas in the regular season. But in 91, when they came into the Final Four, fait accompli, they were going to win it all, and then Duke beat them in the semis here in the Dome. That's the thing. There have been 3 different teams that have come to a Final Four in Indy undefeated trying to match Indiana and couldn't get it done. Pretty remarkable. NFL playoffs. Did we learn anything over the weekend? Because I think it was a bad weekend for Chris Ballard. I'll tell you why. Hey, there's Jake Query for Game Day Men's Health. You've heard me talking about Game Day Men's Health, guys, and you might be saying to yourself, but why Game Day Men's Health, Jake? Let me tell you exactly why. Because it's a new year. You want to get in shape. You want to try to reinvigorate that youth that you had in terms of feeling great, being able to get your workouts, your energy, whether it be ED treatments, peptide therapies, replacement therapy for testosterone. Game Day Men's Health is locally owned and operated. And all of their plans, this is the best part, guys, all the plans are tailored to individuals, and the results are monitored to make sure that everything is happening in terms of what is custom made and best for you in terms of the individual plans. And, of course, I mentioned before, FDA-approved pharmacies right here in the United States. That's who Game Day works with to ensure every patient receives the highest quality testosterone and services under FDA approval. That's what you love about Game Day Men's Health. Right now is the time to get back in shape, whether, again, we're talking about testosterone replacement therapy, whether you're talking about getting the energy you need, the ED treatments, peptide therapies. Find out more at Game Day Men's Health, locally owned and operated, GameDayMen'sHealth.com.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I don't know if you've noticed this, Nathaniel, and it's only been of late this has been taking place. We had the chipmunk that runs the computer. And occasionally at the old place that we used to be at, the chipmunk, we'd catch him having a smoke break, right? Well, that chipmunk retired. We have a new chipmunk who's done a good job, but when we go to the phone lines occasionally, he does amphetamines. And so everything speeds up a little bit, and so we're working on that. But right there, he just stepped out for a quick smoke break, it appears, right? Happens from time to time. It does happen. NFL playoffs, we'll get into it in just a minute. Actually wanted to bring in real quick on the phone lines at 239. What is the telephone number here? I almost said 1075. 239-1070, obviously, right? That is where we go, and Nick joins us on the program. Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hey, Jake. I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing, sir?
I am well, thank you. By the way, this isn't banned, Nick, is it?
No.
Well, I didn't mean it that way. There's a guy that calls in the show named Nick that always claims that he's been banned from the radio station, which I've never banned anybody. I didn't know. I didn't think it was you.
He doesn't sound very banned.
That's right. All right, what's going on, Nick?
Oh, not too much. Great song selection there, by the way, on the songboard. Love it. So I just was giving you guys a call because you mentioned, maybe only 50 people have been to both games, and I'm lucky enough I will be going with a gentleman who was at the national championship in '76, and he will be at this national championship in Miami here come next Monday.
All right, what's his name, Nick?
Ed Roviero is his name.
And Ed
Great gentleman.
Ed is what relation to you? I mean, buddy, uncle, neighbor?
Buddy, think of him as family. He's the father of my IU roommate, actually. So my roommate at IU, it was his dad. So it's a family of Hoosiers over there.
And so you're going, how many of you guys are going?
8 of us.
Wow.
8 of us right now.
So you got your tickets, right?
Yes, and things have been a little wild with the IU priority seating, too. But everyone is trying to come to this game from around the world. It's been a little wild.
Okay. Are you driving or are you flying? Because the flights are outrageous, right?
We're flying. We're getting there a day ahead of time and then staying for a couple days after.
Did you go to the Peach Bowl? Did you go to the Rose Bowl? Either one. Did
the Rose Bowl, actually, and it was one of the greatest moments in our life as Hoosier fans. Probably the greatest.
Okay, let me ask you this, Nick. The Rose Bowl is fabulous. I mean, everything about it, right? It's beautiful. The stadium, it's historic and all that. The only thing I would say about it is it was built in like 1920, and you can tell because the seats are super tight and getting in and out is a nightmare. True or false?
100% true. It's an all-day event. Did you hear it was like flooded where all the IU fans had to hang out? So there was like under 2 feet of water, mud everywhere before the game. And they were pumping water out of the pregame party. It was insanity.
Here's the thing, though. 72% of those people were at the Snake Pit in the 80s at IMS, so it was no big deal. They're like, it's cool. We're used to it, right?
You can tell because they're good on mud. They don't slip on mud. They walk slow.
That's right. That's right. Don't want to spill your beer in the mud. Nick, listen, I appreciate you calling in. More so, I appreciate you listening to the show. And I would love for you to call in. And I'm going to say when, because I don't want to jinx anything. Well, I'll say if, because I don't want to jinx anything and say when. But should the Hoosiers win it, I want you to call in next week, all right?
You got it.
All right.
Go Hoosiers.
Nick is on his way to Miami along with Ed. That's cool. Was at the 76 game and will be there on Monday night. I did mention NFL, but I want to get to this because this was just sent to me a little bit ago. Many of you may have heard of the allegation or the situation taking place with Marcus Freeman, the Notre Dame football coach, and an allegation of assault or battery, a physical altercation that allegedly took place over the course of the last month. The St. Joseph County Prosecutor's Office has issued the following statement. I will read it to you right here. On January 3rd, 2026, officers with the Mishawaka Police Department responded to a complaint of battery that occurred at a high school wrestling tournament hosted at Mishawaka High School involving Marcus Freeman. The incident occurred at the exit doors to the gymnasium and was captured on video surveillance. Numerous witnesses were interviewed by police. That investigation was thereafter tendered to this office. After reviewing the Mishawaka Police Department's investigation into this incident, the prosecutor's office has determined that no criminal battery occurred. As such, no criminal charge will be filed against Mr. Freeman. Generally, this office does not comment on cases in which no charges are filed. However, because numerous media outlets have commented on the allegations, this office believed it appropriate to release its findings. Basically, what it comes down to is that Marcus Freeman's son was at a wrestling match. An assistant wrestling coach at a local high school, I'm reading this now, advised responding officers that he was approached by a person who said something he could not recall. The complainant stated that the person then gave him a, quote, two-handed push. He further stated that he had, quote, no clue what motivated the push. He stated that he learned from someone else that the person who shoved him was Marcus Freeman. Mr. Freeman had left the high school before officers were able to speak with him. Now, I'm no Perry Mason, but I find it kind of hard to believe that someone living in the Mishawaka South Bend area who is attending a sporting event would not recognize Marcus Freeman. But I guess it's possible. But you would think immediately people would say, oh, the kid wrestling there, that's the son of Marcus Freeman. Basically what this comes down to, during the subsequent interview with detectives, the complainant reiterated that Mr. Freeman gave him a two-handed push which caused him to stumble backwards. He advised detectives that he immediately recognized Mr. Freeman. That seems contrary to the previous statement, but okay. He also advised officers that he believed Mr. Freeman was, quote, rich and that he planned to hire an attorney. Officers interviewed two acquaintances of the complainant. One acquaintance described Mr. Freeman shoving the complainant with an open hand. Another said that Mr. Freeman struck him, causing the complainant to be pushed backwards by the blow. A review of the video evidence does not support those assertions. While the video of the incident is from a distance, officers were able to identify Mr. Freeman. In the video, officers were able to observe Mr. Freeman moving to leave a crowded gym with his son. The exit doors were partially blocked. Mr. Freeman walked towards the doors. The video shows the complainant moving from his position near the doors and approached Mr. Freeman. Mr. Freeman turned towards the complainant and paused for approximately 1 second. He then left the auditorium at a walk. Basically, what this comes down to is some overzealous wrestling coach guy tried to start something with Marcus Freeman, who left. So there you go. But that was a big story over the course of the week. NFL playoffs last night, I thought it ended with a dud. I thought the best game of the playoffs, there were a lot of great games. You know, clearly Green Bay, Chicago was fabulous. Carolina and the Rams was great. And I just feel like, and, you know, San Francisco eking out that win in Philly was very impressive. I thought it was a bad weekend for the Colts in this regard. It's bad, obviously, because they're not playing. But additionally, each of the factors that has gone into putting the Colts in the position they're in of, again, missing the playoffs, not being on the national radar, and I know they got out to the great start this year. I thought Matt Stafford continuing to play at a very high level for the Rams. And, you know, Matthew Stafford has gotten now into the category of when he's on the other sideline, you think to yourself, his team's never out. They're never out of it because Matthew Stafford's there, right? And so, you know, when the Colts were looking for a quarterback, and rumor has it, or report has always been, that Frank Reich and Jim Irsay both really like Matthew Stafford, but Chris Ballard thought Carson Wentz was the better selection. Little bit of insinuation there, but I think probably some truth to it. But either way, it does not look good for the Colts' decision-making that Stafford was not considered more heavily. I think it looks, and it mutes a little bit of the Colts' discussion about how this year their season was derailed by injury. And I get it. Daniel Jones went down for the year. I get it. But reality also is that San Francisco has been as dinged up as anybody. I mean, San Francisco has had nearly historical injury buildup. And yet, here they are. And so you can't, it's hard to sit there and say, well, injuries were the reason that any team is not where they are. In San Francisco, that includes at the quarterback position. Not for the year, I realize, but they had a quarterback there ready to go. And I get it. Richardson was hurt also. I get it. But it just, to me, it feels like you can't necessarily go to that well every time when you have a team playing at a high level that has gone through the injuries that they have. And then at the quarterback spot also, Drake May. New England didn't sit there and dilly-dally around and go with, 100 different options at quarterback. I mean, they had Mac Jones. New England has always been proactive. And they were proactive in going out and saying, you know what, we've got to upgrade at the quarterback spot, and Drake May is the guy that we're going to do it, and it didn't matter who they had or didn't have or whatever else, they went and got him, and it looks like he's going to be a very good quarterback, and maybe in that next guard. He kind of feels like he has a Stafford-like trajectory in front of him. But I thought there was illumination from a number of different teams in the NFL that countered reasons and excuses we give ourselves to feel better about the Colts. I saw J&B earlier. We will see if he is here or out and about. I haven't seen him. Is he out and about or is he here today? Do we know, Nathaniel?
I think he's here.
All right, we will do the crossover brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com. 317-353-2141 next.
Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
So you never know who you might see in the building. Sitting here, looked out the window to see if JMV's on his way in for the crossover, and who do I see but from Trackside and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Kurt Cavan in the building. Picking up your parking pass, is that right, Kurt?
Yep. As Kevin often says, I like to see if my key card works. Well, now I have a new key card.
Now, hang on. We got to see if your mic works. Your key card doesn't work, or your key card works, but your mic doesn't. Which mic here, Nathaniel? For Kurt.
He's on now. We can hear him.
All right. Now go.
How we doing now?
There we go. Okay, so you got the parking pass,
Kevin's
right?
always saying he doesn't know if his key card works. So I have a new key card now. I did park right outside the door, so I got right in.
What is the schedule for Trackside here? Because it's hard to believe. I mean, we're 130 some days from the 500, 150, something like that. But it'll be here before we know it, right?
Well, Doug Bowles keeps the official count, so I can't say how many days to the Indy 500, but he knows. And for us, it's really just once a week. Somewhere once a week, you can keep track of the social channels. I've been working on stuff from an IndyCar standpoint, and what really kind of got me fired up today was just kind of looking through some of the old stats. Rick Mears, 11 front row starts in 15 years of the Speedway. I mean, something like that, it'll never happen again.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, it's a
and Kurt, you could make the argument. By the way, Trackside Tuesdays, 7:00, right here on this radio station. Pacers and Celtics tonight at 7. By the way, Kurt, one of the things about Mears that we forget, even with all of the incredible accomplishment, relatively speaking, by today's standard, retired early.
Yeah,
I mean, still basically in his prime, right?
He did. And we talk about Will Power being such a great qualifier in the IndyCar series. Mears was on the pole 20% of all his races. 20%, 1 in 5. I mean, I know he drove for Team Penske, and in that era, Team Penske was, is Alabama football kind of
right,
the equivalent. But
Indiana football by today's standards, Kurt.
That was by that standard.
No, I get it.
But Mears is unbelievable, and the fact. I mean, I don't say this often, but I can say it to you. The fact I was texting with him this morning about that very subject, it's hard to believe that, you get a chance to be around your heroes. We've been around a lot of them, Foyt, Andretti, Mears, Rutherford, all of them. And it's just great to have them as part of our city and, people we work with.
I've told the story before. Several years ago, I was in Toronto, IndyCar race, and I was calling the race from up above, one of the areas where all the spotters are. And at that time, Mears was spotting for Elio. There was a rain delay, so to fill time, I was one of the spotters said, hey, do some trivia questions. So I'm giving out trivia to all these guys. And one of the questions I asked was, who are the only 2 drivers to win the Indy 500 in 3 different decades? Okay? And, they're going around, they're throwing out names, and, like Uncle Bobby. I'm like, of course, that's one of them, right? 68, 75, 81. And they couldn't come up with a third. They're sitting there, because I think you think of Mears as like almost, just the 80s and then the early 90s. But so anyway, Mears is standing there in the back. He's one of the spotters, but he's not chiming in. And finally I go, do you want to tell him the answer? And Kurt, he was like uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't like talking about his own accomplishment. You know what I mean? Like he just is a humble dude, just a down-to-earth dude.
When I texted him that
guy.
this morning about that period of his career, his response was, it just shows how good the team was year after year.
Yep. That sounds exactly
and
right.
And this is just 2 guys talking about racing in the middle of January. But he's an amazing individual. We've been lucky to have him around so long. He was the winningest driver of the 80s. I mean, it's all the great drivers we've seen in the 80s. He kicked her butt. So
he was dominant here, no question. All right, so Trackside tomorrow night, 7:00, right?
That's right.
All right, Kurt Cavan here with us. J&V has arrived as well, part of the crossover brought to you by Love Heating and Air. John, big show lined up?
Great big show. Great big show. Yeah, great big.
He said that with all the enthusiasm.
Great big show. Hey, here's something interesting. So I rarely saw much of my dad, and I haven't brought him up very much, but he attended Miami once upon a time. And rumor has it he started out on the freshman football team and was banished after the first semester.
Really?
Rumor also has it, and you can look this up. I've not been able to verify that. I know he was down there at that time, but the rumor has it his roommate was Pete Banasak. if you remember the name Pete Manasak, who played for the Raiders, and I think now does something in Jacksonville with the Jaguars. But it's like unsolved mysteries. I've been trying to track down that information.
So did he play high school football in Indiana?
At LaPorte, Indiana.
Okay.
LaPorte, Indiana. And then I went to Miami, again, as my mom has told me, and then flunked out. He passed that gene down quite well. Not a lot of things he passed down, but that was one of them I got. He passed away in 2017. I had no idea he even passed away until a friend of mine saw it on Facebook. So we were not tight by any stretch of the imagination, but a little bit of a backstory regarding the Miami Hurricane football program. I think Banaszak, George Myra, I think, was also a part of that team
So that would
in
have
the
been
early 60s.
Yeah, I was going to say 60s, right?
But I think it may have been a freshman team because do they have a freshman team
Yes,
and then a
because-
regular team too?
Yeah, because
So,
back then you couldn't play varsity.
So if somebody wants to like private dick and find out exactly what was going on with my dad, I mean, he could have been lying about everything. But
Didn't Sylvester Stallone either go to Miami or spend time in Miami? Honestly. So there's a prominent person in town. A friend of mine's mother who's very prominent in town. I'm not going to say names. She went to Miami and dated Sylvester Stallone while at Miami. I'm sure of this.
Was he sly?
I think he. I don't know if he. I don't know if he went by sly or just was. Maybe they broke up because he was a little too sly. That might be the case. I don't know.
I'm having a good time along with James trying to find old school Hurricanes to come on the show. Because I've had Melvin Bratton on before because he used to rep Anthony Richardson, so he was on maybe 3 or so years ago. Randall Thrill Hill is one we're with, and Steve Walsh, who was here as well, is a guy that's going to come on later on this week. So I kind of dig, sifting through the rubble of the old school Hurricanes.
I'm trying to get Michael Irvin. What do you think the odds are? I've reached out to him.
I think pretty good.
Yeah, I think they're really good. Yeah, so we're trying to do that. So I like that. Those teams were fun as hell. To watch.
It's listen, they're really good. I mean, Oregon's great and Alabama's great and Ohio State's great. I mean, Indiana. There's no reason to think if Indiana stays at this that Indiana doesn't do it. But Miami is good, and that front four is.
Miami's going to match their physicality.
They are.
That's the one team that I thought could match their physicality. By the way, the one thing that bothers me about the whole thing, they've been talking about Indiana buying players and Milwaukee and Cuban and all these things. Let's just total up Miami's players over the years and see what the dollar figure is.
Well, yeah.
Come on.
The quarterback alone.
That's right.
He's driving around in a Lamborghini and got he upgraded. He had the one girlfriend that was an influencer, and now he's got a professional influencer and the whole deal. All right, so John's up next. Kurt Cavan, you'll hear him along with Kevin Lee tomorrow night, 7 o'clock for Trackside. Pacers in action tonight, taking on the Celtics. We will discuss that tomorrow. John is up next. He will bring you home for the rest of the way. And as always, I thank you for listening to Query & Company.